For my final major project, I'm producing a documentary on the tiny house movement. Open City Documentary Film Festival is the competition where I will be submitting my documentary. All the entries are non-fiction and must be entered into one of two categories: documentary short or documentary feature. Unfortunately, due to the time frame of the final major project, I will be unable to submit my project in time for this year's deadlines. My intention is to submit my documentary short for the early bird deadline of 2019. I've highlighted the most important guidelines for the competition. The festival only accepts submissions of documentary films completed after the 1st of January 2018 and must also take into consideration the platform in which I submit my documentary. The competition also accepts submissions on DVD. The rationale was an opportunity to explain what I've learned collectively over the past 2 years. Over the last 12 units of creative media production, I've had an opportunity to study a variety of different forms of media. Most importantly, I developed my knowledge of three specialisms which are key to the industry: editor, cinematographer, and art director. I've also had freedom to experiment with different types of productions and ideas. Most importantly, I have learned how to correctly carry out research which builds the foundation of any project. I'll be combining all the knowledge I have gained prior to this unit to make a professional production. I'll be also focusing on producing a documentary for my final major project and intend on putting together a solid portfolio. I will then use this as a vehicle to pursue my career aspiration in documentary filmmaking. The project concept has enabled me to explain my ambitions for my final major project and outline what I want to achieve. For my final major project, I am aiming to produce an informative documentary film between 10 to 15 minutes long. I will be conducting both primary and secondary research using surveys, the internet, and interviews. I'll be travelling to various different locations to gather B-roll, interviews, and found footage based on my research. The equipment I plan to use varies from DSLRs to GoPros depending on the situation I find myself in. On reflection, my last documentary lacked the first-person perspective and I didn't capture the footage I was aiming for. To improve my production, I will be focusing on gathering as much feedback as possible from peers, family, and the general public. My aim is to identify exactly what people want to see in relation to my chosen topic. The evaluation was an opportunity to explain how I will be keeping track of my progress and analysing the work I have completed. This will highlight all the positives and negatives I have encountered and tasks that still need to be completed. By identifying where I've made mistakes, I can learn from them and make improvements to my work. In the final stages of this unit, I will complete an overall evaluation using the weekly blogs to provide an outline. The first survey I created was to gather feedback from my 3 documentary ideas. I wanted to focus on light-hearted topics where I could create a story. The choices were the tiny house movement, allotments, and barbershops. My aim was to create and challenge myself to think creatively by picking something different. Over 60% of respondents voted for the tiny house movement, 35% opted for the allotment, and nobody voted for barbershops. The idea behind making a documentary on a barbershop was to focus on the customers who come to get their hair cut and derive an interesting narrative from those characters. I also wanted to investigate the reasons why the men or women have chosen this career path and what they enjoy about their job. Making a documentary about the allotments followed a very similar idea, and I wanted to get in contact with the individuals who work there, many of which who are retired, and hear their stories. I also wanted to find out why they chose to dedicate their time to cultivate a small plot of land and what benefits owning an allotment brings. Finally, the tiny house movement would provide a window into the lives of individuals who have chosen to live an unconventional lifestyle. Similarly, I want to investigate the reasons why people have chosen to live small and the challenges they face as a result. I also filmed some focus groups which were very helpful and gave me a detailed insight into my ideas. It was great to talk to people face to face with direct feedback. Through my topic research, I have identified multiple elements which have influenced my work. Before starting this project, I was relatively naive with the concept of tiny houses. As my research progressed, it became clear that there were challenges which the movement faces, one of which is planning permission. This has changed the focus of my production, as I now want to challenge government laws and help push forward for a solution. Similarly, I also learned about the UK housing crisis, which is a topical issue currently. I was aware of the threat of this and what it poses to many people and the UK economy. I want to investigate how tiny houses could be used as a solution to this epidemic. Based on this research, I've developed my idea to incorporate the issues that the movement faces and on the other hand provide a solution to a national crisis. The second survey that I have created was specifically aimed at a tiny house community on Facebook with over 4,000 members. I have had a very positive and successful result overall. The data that I collected is very beneficial and gave a clear idea on the target audience. From this data, I can conclude that the majority are female within the 45 to 64 age group. In addition, I also pitched my developed idea and asked if it could be improved. The response was overwhelming, with many different individuals giving me advice and things in which I should include. I've taken note of each response and concluded which changes I should make to my idea. One improvement that was outlined was ensuring that I had established a clear divide between gypsies and tiny house dwellers. There is a very negative stigma which revolves around travelling folk, and my aim is to debunk and separate these stereotypes. The research has played a critical part into developing my idea, and I was able to make lots of improvements. This consisted of drawing attention to more challenges the movement faces and the solutions for them. The third survey that I sent out to my target audience regarded different documentary types. The most popular choice was expository, which was what I was aiming for. This was shortly followed by participatory, however it would have taken a lot of work to produce a documentary of this type. My idea was to build my own tiny house, but the frame of time for this project would not have made this possible. My next section of research was on codes and conventions. I identified what makes a good expository documentary by watching other examples, then would take notes and use them to improve my own. The first production I watched was on air pollution and the key elements, which I picked up and want to include in my own film. These elements are the interviews, colour grading, and statistics, which were displayed on the screen. In addition, I also found myself picking up on areas which could be improved. I found this very beneficial to my progress, as it shows that I can learn from other people's mistakes and ensure that I don't apply them to my own. The next documentary I researched was very similar to what I was aiming for. It follows a man who built his own tiny house while he was a teenager. This was very helpful, as I was able to outline a structure to follow in my own documentary. Other elements included editing techniques such as L-cut and J-cut, and the use of B-roll. There are multiple locations that I have selected for my documentary, all of which are outside. These are in picturesque locations in Great Britain, such as Tenby in Pembrokeshire, Windermere in Lake District, and Land's End in Cornwall. I want to capture the true beauty of the country and highlight this as a benefit to tiny house living. These locations suit my genre because they all follow the nomadic, off the beaten track vibe which I am trying to achieve. They are also suitable for tiny house dwelling since they are less economically developed parts of the country. Through analysis of other documentaries and research, I was able to compose a rough outline of the narrative structure I'm aiming to use. This has 5 parts: exposition, development, complication, climax, and resolution. These are the test shoots that I'll be using for my documentary film. As you can see, the subject is captured from 2 different points of view. One shot is a close-up and the other is a mid-shot. The idea behind the mid-shot is to capture the subject as a whole, and the idea behind the close-up is to capture the finer details such as facial expressions. By varying my camera angles, I hope to make my production look more professional. I will be also using a feature in Premiere Pro called Multicam to incorporate the shots into my production. My production suits my target audience because I have tailored my idea to suit my survey responses. I feel confident that I've identified the group of people that I was aiming my documentary towards. My results conclude that the majority are females aged 45 to 64. I went into detail and researched the most popular genre of music and colour scheme for this group. This I will incorporate into my production. I've also taken on board everyone's feedback, the majority of which fall into the target audience group, and made improvements to my idea accordingly. I've included subject matters which are of interest to my target audience because they suggested them. My proposal is composed of the rationale, project concept, and evaluation, all of which are detailed and provide an outline for me to follow. I highlighted that I wanted to include more first-person perspective, and as a result I have made sure to contact individuals who are on the forefront of the movement. The theory behind the production, including both primary and secondary research, test shoots, and focus groups, have helped me fulfill my proposal and meet my expectations.